Today we have 26 countries that have committed to deploying troops as a reassurance force in Ukraine or to being present on the ground, at sea, or in the air to provide this reassurance to Ukrainian territory and to Ukraine the day after the ceasefire or peace. This force does not have the will or the objective of waging some war against Russia, but it is a force that must guarantee peace and provide very clear a strategic signaling. It will be deployed within the framework of a ceasefire, not on the front line, but in geographies that will be defined. But they aim to prevent any new major aggression and to involve the 26 states very clearly in the lasting security of Ukraine.
26 nations are ready to support ground deployment to Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron said that Europe had finalized its plans for a peacekeeping mission. Meanwhile, China, Russia and North Korea seriously challenging the US global leadership. So how do Europeans plan to deploy troops to Ukraine, and will the US also commit to this effort? 26 nations pledged to deploy troops to Ukraine or support this effort to provide post-war security guarantees for Ukraine, signaling a renewed European commitment to deter future aggression from Russia. Emmanuel Macron announced that 26 countries have committed to establishing so-called reassurance force that will provide security support across land, sea and air domains once active hostilities in Ukraine come to an end. These forces are intended not to direct combat against Russian troops, but to serve as a deterrent, offering training, equipment and symbolic military presence designed to prevent future aggression. Financial Times reports that the coalition's approach is a mixed one. While countries such as France and UK indicated willingness to deploy troops, others, including Italy and Bulgaria, have ruled out sending ground forces. Instead, these nations plan to contribute through ceasefire monitoring, naval patrols and logistical support. The goal is to maintain a broad, unified front with varied contributions that match each country's capabilities. Quote, "The fact that 26 countries are ready to stand with Ukraine in this way sends a powerful message to Moscow," Macron said during the summit, underscoring the importance of European solidarity. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump and European leaders held a tense phone call yesterday, according to the German newspaper Bild. Donald Trump held a tense phone call with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. This conversation took place right after a major summit in Paris. According to the newspaper, Trump strongly criticized European countries for still buying Russian oil. He says that by doing this, Europe was helping to fund Russia's war effort. Trump also raised concerns that some European countries were getting around sanctions by buying oil through other nations like India. European leaders pushed back Trump's claims. Ursula von der Leyen said that EU had already greatly reduced its oil imports from Russia since the beginning of full-scale war. However, she admitted that completely ending energy ties with Russia is difficult because of the ongoing situation. There was also doubt among Europeans about how serious Trump was about enforcing sanctions. Some European leaders were skeptical because Trump had previously delayed putting sanctions into effect in other cases. Also, the US role in providing Ukraine with security guarantees remains uncertain, with no serious commitment to ground troop deployment. Macron emphasized discussions with Washington to clarify the scope of American involvement in security guarantees, particularly regarding air support and intelligence sharing, according to Reuters. Trump still criticizes Europe for buying Russian oil, citing that Russia earned over 1.1 billion euros from EU fuel exports. Trump argues that continued purchases directly finance Moscow war effort. He also called for sanctions against China, accusing Beijing of facilitating Russia's military campaign. Trump framed the war as primarily a European problem and pressed the continent to step up its defense commitments, stopping short of commitment US ground forces. Instead, he emphasized US support through intelligence, air cover and economic sanctions. US administration approach reflects a strategic shift toward encouraging Europeans to do more for regional security. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky hailed the summit as a serious, concrete step toward securing Ukraine's future safety, praising the tangible commitments made by coalition members. International media reports about a growing rift, however, between Europeans and US administration on how to move forward with this war. According to Reuters, Paris summit and the call highlight both European determination and underlying tensions in transatlantic relations. Europeans are keen to demonstrate capacity to support Ukraine, but remain reliant on US strategic backing, particularly in intelligence and air defense. Meanwhile, Trump's insistence on pushing Europe to end Russia's oil imports and increase pressure on China signals a hardening US stance focused on economic leverage rather than direct military engagement. His approach underlines a broader strategic recalibration as DC, Washington seeks to balance deterrence with avoiding deeper involvement in this conflict. Also, Moscow unresolved questions remain about the extent of US military involvement, and European readiness pose challenges to the alliance's long-term effectiveness. Also, as China staged its most elaborate military parade during this week, flanked by Russian dictator Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, US policymakers and foreign policy analysts voiced mounting concerns about what many see as a symbolic yet potentially consequential challenge to American global leadership. The event, held in central Beijing on September 3rd to commemorate the 18th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, served not only as a national celebration but also as a political statement. It projected the growing strategic alignment among authoritarian regimes and underscored Beijing's ambition to reshape the global order. Broadcast live to audiences across China, the parade along China's Avenue featured more than 12,000 troops from the People's Liberation Army and showcased the sophisticated of Chinese military hardware. According to Wall Street Journal, the display, including ICBMs, hypersonic missiles, stealth fighter jets, and autonomous drone swarms, representing a significant evolution in Chinese military capabilities. As Reuters reports, the presence of Putin and Kim standing beside the Chinese President Xi Jinping marked the first public appearances of all three dictators together. This was widely interpreted as a deliberate signal of an emerging strategic axis, openly defying US liberal world order. For the Kremlin, the event provided opportunity to showcase Russia's realignment toward Asia amid its growing isolation from the West over the war in Ukraine and sanctions. Putin's participated highlighted Moscow increasingly in deterrent relationship with China and North Korea, both economically and diplomatically. Quote, "Xi used this event to show he is not only in charge domestically, but that China is now the actor of an emerging authoritarian bloc," one former US official told Reuters. The report describes the event as a diplomatic tour de force, with analysts pointing to Xi orchestration as a part of an effort to project strength abroad while grappling with domestic challenges, including slowing down economy, political reshuffling, and persistent health rumors surrounding the Chinese leader. However, not all global observers are convinced that the Beijing summit marks the formation of durable political or military alliance. The Guardian editorial board cautioned against overestimating the event, noting that China, Russia, and North Korea do share overlapping interests, particularly in challenging the West. However, their historical mistrust and divergent priorities prevent them from uniting into a cohesive bloc. Quote, "This is not a formal alliance, but it is a statement of intent that should be taken seriously." In the US, President Trump issued a sharply worded response via Truth Social, accusing Xi, Putin, and Kim of conspiring to undermine the US. Trump linked the trust gathering to a modern-day Axis alliance that framed it as a profound insult to American sacrifices in the Second World War. Others in the U.S. national security establishment struck a more measured tone. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton described the growing coordination between China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea as a more serious geopolitical threat to the U.S. leadership since the Cold War. Bolton emphasized that while not formally united, these regimes are increasingly coordinated in their efforts against the U.S. Even as these governments present a united front, analysts continue to point out the deep-seated vulnerabilities within each regime. The Guardian editorial board noted that China faces economic headwinds, including a growing debt crisis and surging youth unemployment. Russia remains bogged down militarily and economically due to the war against Ukraine. North Korea, meanwhile, is still grappling with chronic economic isolation and food shortages. These internal pressures, the editorial argues, could limit the staying power of any de facto alliance among the three states. For Washington, the event raises not only questions about the resilience of U.S. alliance and global influence, but also the urgency of crafting a coherent long-term strategy to respond to this emerging authoritarian alignment. That's all for today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and glory to Ukraine!